Hello and welcome to A Wheel Thing TV. I'm Dave Knoll. In this week's edition we're checking out the Ford Falcon XR8. We never thought we'd see it in Australia, the return of the XR8 badge, but there it is on the front of the FGX. As mentioned with the XR6, some minor cosmetic changes, but enough to make it look a completely different car at the front and at the rear. Really all they've done is just change the profile of the plastic just here. The top of that they've left pretty much alone. The bonnet though was changed. They've got this all the way back now to the windscreen. In profile it's pretty much the same car that we've seen over the last decade or so. And at the back again a little bit of trickery. HSV do it so well with their products. All they do is just change the plastic here. But that line there all the way around is exactly the same as the previous model. On the inside it's almost identical. Well, in fact it is pretty much identical to the XR6. The dashboard pretty much the same. It's still got that Lethal Weapon font. We've got the touchscreen in there as well, and it's all done via a keyed start, which I find a little bit odd in a car of this kind of caliber. But it does come up with the Ford display, and as you can see pretty much the same touchscreen that we've got and that 1990s almost style console that we have. Big grippy Dunlop tyres on the XR8, and they do a sensational job for the most part of ironing out all the ripples. 245/35 by 19s, pretty much the same wheel and tyre combination that we saw on the XR6. Big solid Brembo brakes, but I have to question why Ford Australia doesn't use DBA, Disc Brake Australia products. Plenty of legroom as you'd expect in a big Aussie sedan, and certainly for a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, no problems at all for storage. And around the back, with that Jaguar-esque rear end, again, no problems in regards to storage. Well over 500 litres in this boot. You could almost have a spa and a party in there, couldn't you? Out on the road, the 6-speed manual is a little bit notchy. The clutch pressure, though, is quite light for the kind of torque that this car has, so it's been nicely balanced by Ford engineers. The suspension, very compliant. That licorice thin sidewall on the tyre though does allow a little bump thump coming through on some of the speed bumps and some of the potholes that we have here in our roads. Otherwise it's a fantastic fluid chassis. There is pretty much only a few things that'll unsettle it. Even being tossed in the hard turns, the old roundabouts and that kind of thing, the suspension setup works well. There's no body roll, there's no dive, there's no squat. It'll just flow around quite nicely like it's on rails. The sound of that engine is intoxicating, and the flexibility of it. Once you're in maybe 4th, out on the freeway, you don't really need to go to 5th to 6th. You can just move it through, miss a couple of gears if you need to. Overall, it's one of the best packages that you'll find in a fairly, in honesty, basic Australian car. I mentioned earlier about the console design, really hasn't changed much from the previous model. This is fantastic though. This is Ford's Sync 2 setup, and it does have digital tuner. The digital tuner, we took it out to Bathurst for a run. It got out to Mount Victoria before we lost signal, which is great for digital coverage here in Sydney at the very least. But broken down into these 4 quarters, as you can see. So we've got location, we've got temperature, and of course our radio setup here, which brings it down into your AM, FM, and of course your other forms of media as well. Back to home, and then you've got your settings set up. It's all done by touchscreen. It is just brilliant, simple, and intuitive. One of the most magical things about the sound of the XR8 is quite simply this. There really is nothing like the sound of a big V8. 5 litres in this case, supercharged, 335 kilowatts, 570 Newton meters from 2200 RPM. Sensational work, Ford, well done. Well, it's as composed, nimble, agile, flexible, user-friendly as you can get in a big boofy Aussie car. That 6-speed manual is pretty much okay. A couple of little notchy bits in it. That engine is an absolute firecracker. Does need a little bit more torque in my opinion, believe it or not, with 570 Newton meters available, but that all comes in at 2200 RPM. A little bit lower down for some of that usability would be absolutely great. It's big, it's Australian, it's as solid as a rock, and will hit you in the head like a sledgehammer if you do it right. It's a fantastic car, and it's going to be a shame to see the Ford Falcon XR8 going out in a year or two's time. For A Wheel Thing TV, I'm Dave Knoll.